The verdict was announced before I was allowed to speak. The Executive Council has reached a unanimous decision. Chairwoman Eleanor Graves folded her hands on the polished walnut table, her expression carrying the practiced sorrow of someone pretending that cruelty was responsibility. Director Adrien Vale, you are hereby stripped of your authority and permanently exiled from the Empire Consortium. Silence swallowed the room. 24 council members sat around the circular chamber. Every one of them avoided my eyes. Not one. Not even Daniel, the man whose career I had rescued 3 times. He lowered his head as though shame hurt more than betrayal. The accusation screen behind Eleanor glowed in crimson. Treason against the consortium. Misuse of classified intelligence. Market manipulation. Unauthorized negotiations with foreign investors. Every document displayed on that screen had passed through my office. Every signature was mine. Every page had been altered. You forged them, I said quietly. Several reporters standing outside the glass walls leaned closer. Eleanor sighed. Please don't make this harder on yourself. I looked around the room. Richard Hale tapped his expensive pen impatiently. Victoria's son crossed her legs, unable to hide the tiny smile curling at the corner of her lips. Daniel never looked up. Not once. Years. I had spent years protecting these people. When Richard nearly bankrupted the Western Division because of reckless speculation, I buried the evidence. When Victoria secretly sold internal research to gain political leverage, I convinced regulators it had been a clerical mistake. When Daniel signed contracts while drunk in Singapore, I stayed awake for 71 hours repairing everything. Not because they deserved it, because the consortium did. The Empire Consortium employed nearly 400,000 people across the world. Its collapse would destroy families. I believe protecting it mattered more than protecting myself. Perhaps that had been my greatest mistake. Eleanor slid a document across the table. Sign your resignation. No. Several council members straightened. I smiled faintly. I don't resign. Richard laughed. You don't have a choice. I do. I picked up the fountain pen. For a brief moment, everyone expected a fight. An outburst. A desperate defense. Instead, I signed. One smooth stroke. No hesitation. No argument. Daniel finally looked at me. His eyes widened. That's it. That's it. Victoria frowned. You aren't even going to deny anything? No. Richard leaned forward. You're admitting your crimes? I placed the pen beside the paper. I'm accepting exile. The room became strangely quiet. That was not the reaction they had prepared for. Eleanor narrowed her eyes. You understand you'll never work in this industry again? I understand. You'll lose your pension. Of course. Your residence belongs to the consortium. I know. She stared at me, searching. People like Eleanor feared calm more than anger. Anger could be controlled. Calm usually meant certainty. She couldn't understand why I looked almost relieved. Escort him out. 2 security officers approached. I stood before they reached me. No need. As I walked toward the door, Daniel finally spoke. Adrien. His voice trembled. I stopped without turning around. Take care of the company. The words made him flinch. Because both of us knew. He couldn't. Rain hammered the city. The reporters surrounded me before I reached the steps. Director Vale, did you betray the consortium? Did you steal company assets? Are you guilty? Flash after flash exploded across my face. I answered none of them. A black sedan waited across the street. The driver stepped out and opened the rear door. Mr. Vale. Old Mr. Chun. He had driven me for 12 years. They dismissed me this morning, he said softly. I insisted on driving you one last time. I nodded. Thank you. Neither of us spoke as the city slipped past the windows. Finally he asked, Did you do it? I looked outside. No. I believed you wouldn't. I know. He hesitated. Then why didn't you fight? A long silence followed. Because the fight had ended 3 months ago. They simply hadn't realized it yet. I reached into my briefcase. Inside remained only one object. A plain black notebook. No company logo. No title. Mr. Chen glanced at it. I've never seen that before. You weren't supposed to. He smiled sadly. I suppose this is goodbye. For now. His hands froze on the steering wheel. For now. I closed the notebook. They think they removed me today. I looked at the skyline where the Empire Consortium Tower dominated every building. They're late. The apartment was already empty when I returned. Not because someone had forced me out. Because I had packed everything 2 months earlier. Every bookshelf, Every painting, every personal file, even the coffee mugs. The movers had believed I was renovating. In truth, I had been disappearing, one room at a time. I walked through the quiet living room. The echo almost sounded unfamiliar. A single envelope rested on the kitchen counter. No stamp, no address. Someone had slipped it under the door. Inside was a handwritten note. You accepted Exile too easily. Meet me at Warehouse 9. Midnight. Come alone. No signature. I burned the paper over the sink. The ashes curled into black petals. Exactly as expected. Someone was nervous. Good. Warehouse 9 stood beside the abandoned Eastern Docks. The district had once belonged to the consortium before budget cuts abandoned it to rust and weeds. Midnight fog rolled across broken concrete. Footsteps echoed behind me. You came. Daniel. He looked exhausted. His expensive suit was wrinkled. His tie hung loose. You shouldn't have, I replied. He laughed bitterly. I needed answers. You already have them. No. His voice cracked. I have accusations. I have forged documents. I have a council celebrating your downfall. He stepped closer. And none of it makes sense. I watched the river. What do you want to know? Why didn't you defend yourself? Would it have mattered? I would have believed you. I turned toward him for the first time. Would you? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Because both of us knew. When the vote happened, he had raised his hand. I was afraid, he whispered. I know. They said the investors demanded a sacrifice. I know. They promised the company would survive. I know. His shoulders shook. Then why aren't you angry? I smiled faintly. Because fear always collects its debt. He stared. I don't understand. You will. Wind rattled loose sheets of metal overhead. Daniel looked around uneasily. You've changed. No. I have. He rubbed his forehead. The council already replaced you. I expected that. They promoted Richard. I expected that too. They're opening Project Dominion next week. For the first time, I looked directly into his eyes. Did they? Daniel frowned. You knew? Yes. His breathing slowed. Adrien, what exactly did you do before today? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I walked toward the old control room overlooking the docks. Dust coated everything. Except one desk. Clean. Recently used. Daniel noticed it. You've been here. For weeks. Doing what? I opened a drawer. Inside lay dozens of sealed folders. Each marked with dates. Each dated months before my dismissal. Daniel picked one up. His face lost all color. Projected cash reserves. Executive communications. Board meeting transcripts. Private investment memoranda. Confidential. Impossible for anyone outside the executive council to possess. How? I archived everything. His hands trembled. Why? Because I knew the council would eventually remove me. His voice rose. You knew? Yes. Since when? I looked at the oldest folder. Its date was 6 months earlier. The day Richard secretly met Helix Capital. Daniel staggered backward. No one knew about that meeting. I did. He bribed 3 council members? I know. Victoria sold classified patents. I know. Eleanor. Accepted offshore payments. His lips parted. You knew everything? I managed the intelligence division. I smiled without warmth. My job wasn't making decisions. It was knowing them. Daniel slowly sat down. This can't be real. It is. He looked at the mountain of evidence. Then why didn't you expose them? Because they would have denied everything. So, I needed them united. His breathing became uneven. You let them frame you. Yes. You sacrificed your career. Yes. So they believe they had already won. Outside, thunder rolled over the harbor. Daniel whispered. What happens now? I closed the final folder. The first audit begins tomorrow morning. He blinked. What audit? The one no council member knows exists. His face drained of every remaining trace of blood. You reported them? No. Then who did? A car engine echoed somewhere beyond the fog. Its headlights slowly swept across the warehouse windows. I smiled for the first time that night. They came on their own. Heavy footsteps approached the entrance. Then someone knocked exactly 3 times. Not loudly. Confidently. Daniel stared toward the door, his pulse visibly racing. Who was that? I picked up the thick black notebook from the desk. The reason I accepted Exile. The warehouse door began to open. The warehouse door slid open with a slow metallic groan. 5 people entered. None of them wore business suits. Dark blue jackets. Simple identification badges. No unnecessary expressions. The woman in front stopped 3 steps away from me. Mr. Adrien Vale? Yes. She extended a leather credential. National Financial Integrity Commission. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The commission. The only organization powerful enough to investigate corporations above government ministries. Their involvement alone could freeze billions in assets. The woman slipped the credential back into her pocket. My name is Iris Bennett. I've been expecting you. I know. She glanced around the warehouse. Her eyes landed on the neatly arranged archive boxes. You organized everything. I had time. Daniel looked between us. You already know each other? No. Iris answered calmly. We've never met. She looked back at me. But Mr. Vale has been anonymously sending verified intelligence for the past 84 days. Daniel stared. 84. I nodded. The first package was delivered the morning after Richard opened an offshore account. Iris walked toward the boxes. She picked up one folder. Another. Then another. Each carried a coded label. Operation Ash. Operation Dominion. Operation Eclipse. She opened one file. Dozens of photographs. Bank transfers. Private recordings. Board resolutions. Every page carried timestamps. Nothing had been fabricated. She looked at me again. You documented every crime. No. I documented every decision. There is a difference. Her lips curved slightly. A meaningful one. Daniel suddenly stepped forward. You knew all of this. His voice cracked. And you still protected the company? I protected the employees. They're the same. No. My answer came without hesitation. The council confused themselves with the company. They aren't. Silence settled over the warehouse. Daniel slowly lowered his head. I did too. You did. His shoulders slumped. I thought removing you would stabilize everything. I know. They told us investors wanted certainty. They wanted control. Daniel clenched both fists. I voted against you. I remember. I betrayed you. Yes. He waited, perhaps expecting anger, condemnation. Instead, I asked quietly, do you regret voting? His eyes reddened. Every second. Regret. A dangerous emotion. It arrives only after consequences become visible, not before. Iris interrupted gently. The investigation begins at sunrise. Daniel looked up. They'll arrest the council? No. She closed the folder. Not immediately. Richard had planned for investigations. So had Eleanor. Neither was careless enough to leave obvious fingerprints. That was why I had never confronted them. One accusation could be buried. 1,000 decisions could not. I looked toward the fog-covered river. They'll destroy themselves first. The next morning, every financial news channel carried the same headline. Empire Consortium under special regulatory review. The market opened. The company's stock dropped 4%. Then 6. Then 10. Investors panicked. The council immediately called an emergency meeting. I watched it live from a small cafe across town. No one recognized me anymore. Without the tailored suits and executive badge, I was simply another customer drinking black coffee. Richard slammed his palm onto the conference table. This is Adrien. Victoria frowned. How? He planned this. Eleanor remained composed. We have no proof. Richard glared. He accepted Exile because he already knew. Then where's the evidence? No one answered. Because none existed. Not against me. Only against themselves. The television volume increased. A reporter announced, the National Financial Integrity Commission has requested access to all executive financial records covering the past 3 fiscal years. Victoria nearly dropped her tablet. 3 years. Richard's face paled. They can't review everything. Eleanor finally looked worried. They can. A younger council member whispered. What if they find Helix? Richard shot him a murderous look. Shut up. Too late. Fear had entered the room. Fear spreads faster than truth. I finished my coffee. The waitress approached. Another cup? No. You look happy. I smiled faintly. I look relieved. By afternoon, my phone rang for the first time since Exile. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Vale? A familiar voice. Lena Ortiz. Chief Operations Officer. One of the few executives who had never participated in council politics. I heard what happened. So did everyone. I never voted. I know. They excluded me. I know. A pause. Then, I believe you. Those 3 words landed more heavily than I expected. Not because I needed validation. Because they were sincere. She continued. The factories are confused. The employees? They're frightened. They should be. No. Her voice sharpened. They're frightened because they think you abandoned them. I closed my eyes. That was the one consequence I had hoped to avoid. I didn't. I know. Can you keep production stable? I can for a while. For how long? She exhaled slowly. Not if Richard starts making decisions. I almost laughed. He already has. That evening, Empire Consortium's headquarters remained brightly lit long after sunset. Inside, panic replaced confidence. Outside, cameras waited. Inside the executive conference room, Richard paced like a trapped animal. We issue a denial. Victoria shook her head. The commission already has subpoenas. We destroy the servers. Eleanor's eyes snapped toward him. Have you lost your mind? If they can't access the files, they already have copies. Richard froze. How? Silence. Then every eye slowly turned toward the empty chair that had once belonged to me. No one spoke my name. They didn't have to. Across the city, I sat inside a quiet apartment that wasn't registered under my identity. The room contained only essentials. A desk, a bookshelf, a kettle. The black notebook rested beside my untouched tea. Someone knocked twice. Not urgently. Deliberately. I opened the door. Lena stood there. She carried no briefcase. Only exhaustion. You've gotten difficult to find. I intended to. She stepped inside. The apartment surprised her. You really planned to disappear? Yes. She looked around. No photographs. No awards. No reminders. I left those behind. She finally faced me. Why? Because attachment clouds judgment. She studied my expression for several seconds. You're not celebrating. There isn't anything to celebrate. They betrayed you. They betrayed themselves. Lena slowly sat across from me. I've worked beside you for 9 years. I poured tea into 2 cups. You always solved everyone's problems. I tried. Why stop now? I handed her 1 cup. Because solving the wrong people's problems teaches them they never have to change. She lowered her gaze. I think I understand. No. I smiled faintly. I don't think anyone should. She looked at the black notebook. What's inside? My last responsibility. May I? I nodded. She opened it carefully. The first page contained no financial records. No names. Only a handwritten sentence. The company must survive even if its leaders do not. She looked at me again. You never planned revenge. I planned continuity. Every page after that outlined emergency procedures, alternative suppliers, employee protection funds, regional leadership replacements, disaster recovery strategies. Not one page focused on punishing the council. Every page focused on protecting everyone beneath them. Lena closed the notebook with trembling fingers. You built a safety net. I hoped it would never be needed. It is now. Meanwhile, the council's emergency meeting entered its 5th hour. Arguments erupted. Accusations followed. Richard blamed Victoria. Victoria blamed Eleanor. Junior members quietly copied confidential files onto personal drives. One director secretly contacted journalists. Another attempted to transfer money overseas. None of them trusted each other anymore. The unity that had exiled me dissolved within a single day. Exactly as I had expected. When fear becomes stronger than greed, alliances collapse. Near midnight, Daniel called. His voice sounded hollow. They're tearing each other apart. I know. Richard accused Eleanor of taking bribes. I know. Victoria threatened to testify. I expected that. Daniel hesitated. There's something else. I waited. The internal auditors found a hidden authorization. My fingers stopped moving. What authorization? It was signed 6 months ago. I know which one. His breathing became uneven. How could you know before I tell you? Because I signed it. Silence. It transferred operational authority to the regional boards if executive leadership became legally compromised. Daniel whispered. The council overlooked it. They dismissed it as routine compliance. They can't overrule it now. No. For the first time since my exile, a quiet certainty settled over the room. The company would not fall with the council. That had always been the point. Daniel spoke again, almost in disbelief. You really accepted exile, because by then you'd already protected everything that mattered. I looked through the window at the sleeping city. Not everything. What do you mean? Before I could answer, another phone began ringing. Not mine. Lena's. She glanced at the screen. Her expression changed instantly. What happened? She answered without a word. After only a few seconds, The color drained from her face. She slowly lowered the phone. The commission? What about them? They've just sealed the executive tower. Outside, distant sirens echoed through the night. The first domino had finally fallen. Blue emergency lights washed over the glass facade of the executive tower. From the television mounted in the corner of the cafe, every major news network carried the same live broadcast. National Financial Integrity Commission executes search warrant. Employees gathered outside the building in clusters, whispering to one another. Some cried. Others simply stared. No one knew what tomorrow would look like. Lena muted the television. They're frightened. I know. They think the company is finished. It isn't. She looked at me. You sound certain. I am. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft at first, then steadily. I had always liked rainy mornings. Rain made people reveal themselves. Some ran. Some hid. Some stood perfectly still, hoping the storm would pass them by. The council would do none of those things. They would fight each other, exactly as they always had. Inside the executive tower, panic had already replaced authority. Richard stormed into the boardroom, carrying 3 folders. They're copying everything. Victoria threw her tablet onto the table. The commission froze my accounts. You mean our accounts? Our. She laughed bitterly. You've been moving company money into shell corporations for months. Richard froze. You've been spying on me? I learned from Adrien. The room fell silent. Even saying my name felt dangerous now. Eleanor slowly stood. Enough. No. Richard jabbed a finger toward Victoria. She leaked the patents. Victoria shot back immediately. And you bribed procurement officers. You signed those approvals. Because you threatened me. Another council member slammed both hands onto the table. We need one story. No. Another replied. We need lawyers. Someone else muttered. We need Adrien. Silence. No one answered. Because everyone understood the truth. The one man who had quietly solved every crisis was gone, and none of them knew how to replace him. My phone vibrated. A message. Not from Lena. Not from Daniel. From an unknown encrypted number. Meet me. Same harbor. Noon. Alone. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Lena frowned. Another anonymous message? Yes. You think it's a trap? Probably. Then don't go. I have to. She folded her arms. For someone who planned everything, you're making a reckless decision. No. I slipped the phone into my pocket. I'm following someone else's. The harbor looked almost unchanged. Rusted cranes. Empty shipping containers. Seagulls circling overhead. Only one black sedan waited near Warehouse 9. The rear door opened. An elderly man stepped out. Gray suit. Silver cane. Sharp eyes. Chairman Emeritus Theodore Ashcroft. Founder of the Empire Consortium. Officially retired. Unofficially. The only person whose opinion had ever mattered to me. He smiled faintly. You've lost weight. So have you. I suppose exile affects people differently. It depends who ordered it. He chuckled. You always answered questions with another question. I learned from you. He gestured toward the warehouse. Walk with me. We entered without another word. Dust floated through thin beams of sunlight breaking between cracked roof panels. Theodore stopped beside the same clean desk I had used before. You prepared this place well. I hoped I wouldn't need it. But you did. Yes. He leaned on his cane. I received your final report. I assumed you would. You didn't ask me to stop the council. No. Why? Because if anyone could have prevented my exile, it was him. His influence remained enormous despite retirement. I met his gaze. Because saving me would have destroyed the company. His eyes narrowed. Explain. If you intervened, they would accuse you of favoritism. Correct. They'd split the shareholders. Yes. The company would fracture. He nodded slowly. And if I stayed silent, they'd reveal themselves. He smiled. There you are. What? The strategist who built this company. For the first time in days, someone wasn't speaking to the accused executive. He was speaking to the man behind every difficult decision made over the last decade. Theodore reached into his coat. He placed a sealed envelope on the desk. I've been waiting to give you this. I looked at the old wax seal. It carried the original Empire crest. This is my retirement letter. You already retired. Officially. He smiled. Not completely. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. At the bottom, my name. My signature wasn't there. Only his. I looked up. What is this? My contingency. I read the document twice. Then a third time. Even then, I wasn't certain I had understood it correctly. The founder's contingency charter, I said quietly. Theodore nodded. It was drafted 11 years ago. It appoints an interim guardian. If the executive council becomes incapable of governing. My eyes moved to the final paragraph. The guardian would possess temporary authority over operational continuity until an independent review concluded. One name had been written there. Mine. You never told me. I hoped I'd never need to. I folded the document carefully. The council doesn't know this exists. They never asked. He smiled without satisfaction. They were always interested in power. Never responsibility. Exactly. The warehouse became quiet again. Finally I asked, why did you choose me? Theodore looked toward the river beyond the broken windows. Do you remember your first year? I did. Too well. I made too many mistakes. You made expensive mistakes. I laughed softly. I thought you'd fire me. I nearly did. His eyes softened. Then I watched what happened afterward. I remained silent. You stayed every night until every mistake was corrected. I caused them. So you accepted responsibility. He turned toward me. That is the rarest quality in leadership. Back at headquarters, the investigation intensified. Commission officers occupied entire floors. Hard drives disappeared into evidence boxes. Financial controllers were interviewed separately. No executive was allowed to leave without authorization. Inside a temporary conference room, Daniel sat across from Iris Bennett. She placed another file in front of him. You've cooperated fully. I should have sooner. She nodded. Perhaps. He looked exhausted. I voted against Adrien. I've read the minutes. I failed him. You failed yourself first. Daniel lowered his head. She continued calmly. Tell me something. What? During the years you worked beside him, did he ever ask for personal favors? Daniel frowned. No. Did he ever misuse company money? Never. Did he ever threaten anyone? No. Then why did the council fear him? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because the answer wasn't simple. Finally he whispered. Because he remembered everything. Iris raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? If Richard promised something, Adrien remembered. If Victoria lied, Adrien remembered. If someone broke trust, he remembered. Daniel smiled sadly. He never used those memories against us. He simply never forgot. That afternoon, Richard made the worst decision of his career. He called a press conference. He believed confidence could stop panic. Cameras flashed as he stepped behind the podium. The Empire Consortium remains financially stable. Questions exploded immediately. Then why is the commission inside your headquarters? No comment. Did the board fabricate evidence against Adrien Vale? Absolutely not. Were offshore accounts used to hide executive compensation? Richard hesitated. Only for a second. But millions of viewers noticed. His confidence cracked. Another reporter stood. Mr. Hale, can you explain this document? She held up a printed bank transfer. Richard's face turned white. It was authentic. Someone inside the company had leaked it. He looked around the room instinctively, searching for allies. There were none. Victoria had canceled her appearance. Eleanor had released a statement distancing herself from operational decisions. 3 council members had already resigned. Richard stood alone, exactly where ambition eventually leaves a man. As evening settled over the city, Lena arrived at the warehouse. She found Theodore and me reviewing operational maps. Her eyes widened. Chairman Ashcroft. He smiled politely. I've heard good things about you. She bowed her head slightly. I wasn't expecting. No one was. She looked between us. The regional boards have accepted emergency authority. I nodded. Good. They're asking one question. What question? She hesitated. When the company stabilizes, will you come back? The warehouse fell silent. Theodore didn't answer. Lena waited. I looked at the old crest resting beside the contingency charter, then toward the darkening skyline where the executive tower stood surrounded by investigation vehicles. I won't return. Lena's expression fell. Unless it's on terms that protect the company before they protect me. Before anyone could respond, Theodore's secure phone rang. He answered. He listened for less than 10 seconds. Then his calm expression hardened. He lowered the phone slowly. The commission has issued its first arrest warrant. He looked directly at me. It isn't Richard. The name he spoke next changed everything. It's Eleanor. Theodore's words lingered in the warehouse long after the call had ended. It isn't Richard. It's Eleanor. For several seconds, no one spoke. Lena was the first to break the silence. I thought Richard was the one who orchestrated everything. He started it, I replied. Eleanor perfected it. Theodore rested both hands on his cane. Richard wanted your position. Eleanor wanted absolute control. I nodded. She understood that as long as I remained inside the company, every major decision required evidence. And she hated that. Yes. Lena frowned. So she framed you. Because removing you removed accountability. Exactly. Theodore looked toward the city skyline. The commission doesn't arrest chairpersons lightly. They found something undeniable. I already knew what it was. Not because I had seen the warrant. Because there had only ever been one crime Eleanor couldn't erase. 22 months earlier. A confidential emergency meeting. A pharmaceutical subsidiary owned by the consortium had discovered contamination in one of its manufacturing plants. The defective products had never reached hospitals. I had personally ordered production halted. The financial loss was enormous. Richard had exploded. Do you know how much this delay costs? Yes. We'll lose hundreds of millions. Better than losing lives. Eleanor had remained unusually quiet. Then she spoke. What if no one needs to know? The room had frozen. I looked directly at her. You want to release contaminated medicine? I want additional testing. After shipment? It'll save the quarter. I had stood. The discussion is over. Production never resumed until the plant passed every inspection. At the time, I believed I had won. I hadn't. 3 days later, Eleanor secretly authorized a second production line at another facility without informing me. I only discovered it because an internal auditor accidentally copied me on a logistics report. I shut it down within hours. No products escaped. No one was harmed. But Eleanor had signed the authorization. Personally, she thought every copy had been destroyed. She never knew. I had preserved one. Back in the present, my phone vibrated. Iris Bennett. Mr. Vale. Director Bennett. We've arrested Eleanor Graves. I heard. There was a document. I know. She paused. You sound unsurprised. I kept the original. Silence. You? I mailed it anonymously 79 days ago. Another pause. You trusted us before you trusted yourself. No. I trusted evidence. She let out a quiet breath. I wish more executives thought like you. I wish fewer investigations were necessary. Before ending the call, she added, Richard is requesting to meet you. I smiled faintly. He finally remembered I exist. He says only you can save the company. I already did. News of Eleanor's arrest spread within minutes. Employees stopped working. Factories paused production. Financial analysts declared the company's governance critically unstable. Social media exploded with speculation. Then another headline appeared. Former strategy director Adrien Vale maintained silence. Every television panel asked the same question. Where was Adrien Vale? Some believed I had fled the country. Others insisted I had secretly negotiated with competitors. No one guessed the truth. I had no interest in speaking. The louder everyone else became, the clearer the truth sounded. Richard insisted on meeting me without lawyers, without journalists, without witnesses. We met in the same executive office he had claimed after my exile. It looked different now. Messier. Drawers stood open. Stacks of documents covered the floor. Coffee cups lined the windowsill. He hadn't slept. Neither had the company. When I entered, he remained standing. For a long time, he simply stared. Finally, he spoke. You planned all of this. No. You knew this would happen. Yes. That's the same thing. It isn't. He laughed bitterly. It feels like it. I remained silent. He walked toward the window overlooking the city. I used to think you enjoyed controlling people. I never controlled anyone. You controlled outcomes. No. I accepted responsibility for them. He turned. What's the difference? If you control people, they stop thinking. If you accept responsibility, they're free to choose. He lowered his head. And we chose badly. Yes. For the first time since I'd known him. Richard looked genuinely tired. I wanted your seat. I know. I convinced myself I'd lead better. I know. I even believed the company would improve without you. You did. He looked confused. I did. For one day. He frowned. What changed? You stopped listening. Silence. Then he laughed. A hollow, defeated laugh. I don't even know when that happened. I do. When the day success became more important than service. His shoulders slumped. I've lost everything. I looked around the office. The expensive furniture. The artwork. The executive seal on the desk. No, you haven't. You've only lost what never truly belonged to you. His eyes filled with regret. I can testify. I know. I can admit everything. I know. I can help expose everyone else. I expected you would. He stared. You already knew I'd do this? I knew you'd eventually choose survival. He closed his eyes. I don't deserve another chance. No. The answer surprised him. Then I continued. You deserve the chance to tell the truth. He slowly nodded. There was a difference. A profound one. Redemption was never the same as escaping consequences. The office door opened. Iris Bennett entered with 2 investigators. Mr. Richard Hale. He didn't resist. He simply extended his hands. I'll cooperate. As they escorted him away, he stopped beside me. I hated you. I know. But you still protected the company. Yes. Why? I looked out across the thousands of employees leaving work below. Because they never betrayed me. Richard lowered his head. Then he walked away without another word. The office became silent. Lena entered a few minutes later. The regional board has voted unanimously. I didn't ask the result. I already recognized the expression on her face. They want you back. I looked at the empty executive chair, then slowly shook my head. Not as it was. Theodore entered behind her carrying the founder's contingency charter. Then choose your own terms. I took the document. For the first time since my exile, the future belonged to me again. Morning sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the temporary operations center. It wasn't inside the executive tower. I had refused to enter that building. Not yet. Instead, the regional directors gathered in an old training facility on the outskirts of the city. No marble lobby. No private elevators. Just a long conference table, whiteboards, and people who still believed work mattered more than titles. Lena placed a folder in front of me. The board approved every condition. I opened it. No lifetime appointment. No extraordinary salary. No executive immunity. No unchecked authority. Instead, the first page contained a new title. Chief Steward of Operations. Richard had wanted to become the most powerful man in the consortium. I wanted something else entirely. Steward. Not ruler. Custodian. Not owner. The second page contained structural reforms. The Executive Council would no longer control investigations into itself. Every major financial decision required independent review. Anonymous whistleblower protections became permanent. Regional directors gained voting rights equal to headquarters. No single chairperson could ever concentrate power the way Eleanor had. The system itself would become harder to corrupt. Lena smiled. You rewrote the company. No. I signed the final page. I removed the parts that depended on one person. She studied me quietly. Even yourself. Especially myself. 3 days later, I finally walked back into the executive tower. The lobby fell silent. Employees stopped mid-conversation. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked relieved. One young receptionist suddenly stood so quickly that her chair rolled backward. Mr. Vale. I smiled gently. Good morning. Her eyes turned red. I'm sorry. For what? I believed the news. You believed what you were given. She lowered her head. I should have known. No. I shook my head. You should learn. There was a difference. Guilt chained people to the past. Learning allowed them to build the future. As I stepped into the elevator, several employees quietly moved aside. Not out of fear. Out of respect. It felt heavier. And far more uncomfortable. The executive floor looked almost unfamiliar. The expensive paintings remained. The polished floors still reflected the ceiling lights. But something essential had disappeared. Arrogance. The office doors were open. People spoke more softly. Assistants no longer looked terrified whenever an executive walked past. Lena noticed me observing everything. You expected this? I hoped for it. She handed me another report. Employee resignations have dropped. Good. Production is stabilizing. Good. Investors are returning. Expected. She laughed. You never celebrate. I do. When the people doing the work stop worrying about the people above them. She looked through the glass wall toward hundreds of employees moving across the open office. I think that's happening. So do I. That afternoon, the first company-wide meeting was held. Not in the luxurious executive auditorium. In the central manufacturing complex. Thousands of workers stood together. Mechanics, engineers, receptionists, technicians, drivers, managers. People who had kept the consortium alive while executives fought over power. When I stepped onto the stage, no applause came. Only silence. I preferred it that way. I stood behind a simple podium. No prepared speech. No teleprompter. I won't ask for your trust. Thousands of eyes remained fixed on me. Trust isn't requested. It is earned. The room stayed quiet. I also won't tell you the past doesn't matter. It does. Many of you suffered because leaders chose themselves before choosing this company. A mechanic in the front row nodded slowly. I can't erase that. I won't pretend to. I looked across the crowd. What I can promise is that no one sitting in headquarters will ever again be beyond accountability. This time, the applause came. Not loud, not dramatic, steady, honest. It lasted a long time. That evening, I visited the employee memorial garden behind the original factory. Few people even remembered it existed. Small stone markers lined a quiet path beneath old maple trees. Each carried the name of someone who had died while building the consortium over the past 70 years. Engineers, factory workers, security guards, drivers. People history rarely remembered. I stopped before a weathered plaque. Built by many, never owned by one. Theodore had commissioned it decades ago. Now I finally understood why. Footsteps approached behind me. I turned. Daniel. He looked healthier than he had in weeks. Still tired. Still carrying regret. But no longer crushed by it. I thought I'd find you here. You remembered. You brought me here once. I had. After his first promotion. He had asked what the secret to leadership was. I hadn't answered then. Perhaps because I didn't fully understand it myself. Daniel stood beside me. I testified. I know. I accepted responsibility. I know. They'll probably ban me from serving on another executive board. They will. He nodded. I deserve that. Neither of us spoke for a while. The wind stirred the maple leaves overhead. Finally he asked, "Can we ever be friends again?" I looked at the memorial stones. No. His face fell. Then I continued. But we can become two honest men who respect each other. He let out a slow breath. I think that's enough. So do I. He extended his hand. This time, not as an executive, not as someone asking for protection, simply as a man willing to face the consequences of his own choices. I shook it. The past remained, but it no longer controlled either of us. Over the following weeks, the trials continued. Eleanor was convicted of fraud, obstruction of justice, and criminal conspiracy. Victoria accepted a plea agreement after returning millions in illicit profits. Richard testified truthfully against the remaining conspirators. His sentence was reduced, not erased, exactly as justice should work. The newspapers called it the largest corporate scandal in modern history. Employees simply called it the year everything changed. Late one evening, Lena entered my office carrying a small cardboard box. I found this while clearing the old executive archives. She placed it on my desk. Inside lay my old company identification badge, the one security had taken on the day of my exile. I picked it up. The photograph showed a younger version of myself. More ambitious. Less patient. Lena smiled. Will you wear it again? I looked at the badge for a long moment, then placed it back into the box. No. Why not? Because I don't want to become the man who needed it. She nodded with quiet understanding. Outside the office windows, employees continued leaving for home. Laughing, talking, planning dinners with their families. Normal lives. Protected not by one strategist, but by a system finally worthy of them. For the first time in many years. That was enough. Winter arrived quietly. The city moved on long before the headlines did. News channels still replayed footage of executives being escorted into courtrooms. Business magazines still published long analyses of the Empire Consortium scandal. Universities invited experts to lecture on governance failures, ethics, and institutional accountability. None of them interested me. At 7 every morning, I walked through the operations center with a cup of black coffee, greeting engineers, analysts, maintenance workers, and receptionists by name. No entourage. No assistants announcing my arrival. The company no longer revolved around a single office. That had been the point. One afternoon, Lena stepped into my office carrying a thin folder. There's one last matter. There usually is. She smiled. Richard requested a final meeting. I looked out the window before answering. Where? The Correctional Rehabilitation Center. Not a lawyer's office? No. Not a courtroom. She shook her head. He specifically asked for somewhere without reporters. I closed the folder on my desk. Then, that's where we'll meet. The rehabilitation center was quiet. Nothing like the dramatic prisons shown on television. Gray walls. Clean hallways. Few words. Richard was waiting in a simple interview room. No tailored suit. No expensive watch. No polished shoes. For the first time since I'd known him. He looked ordinary. He stood when I entered. I wasn't sure you'd come. You asked. I didn't deserve an answer. No. I took the seat across from him. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't receive one. A long silence settled between us. Finally, Richard slid a folded piece of paper across the table. I wrote this. I unfolded it. It wasn't an appeal. It wasn't a request for help. It was a resignation. Permanent. He had voluntarily surrendered every remaining executive privilege, pension, and honorary title. I wanted to leave before they stripped them away. I looked up. Why? Because for the first time, he struggled to finish the sentence. I wanted one decision in my life to belong to me. I nodded slowly. Then keep it. His shoulders relaxed. You know? He looked down at his hands. I spent years believing you were always one step ahead because you were smarter. You still believe that? No. He smiled faintly. I think you were one step ahead because you never lied to yourself. The room became quiet again. Perhaps that was the greatest difference between us. He had spent years convincing himself that ambition justified compromise. I had spent years accepting that difficult decisions still had to answer to conscience. Before leaving, Richard asked one final question. Do you forgive me? I considered it carefully. Not because I wanted to hurt him. Because the truth deserved precision. I don't carry hatred anymore. He waited. Is that forgiveness? No. What is it? Freedom. He nodded. I hope I earn that someday. So do I. I stood. This time, neither of us looked back. Outside, snow had begun to fall. The city looked strangely peaceful. My phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. The Employee Scholarship Fund just approved its 10,000th application. Thought you'd want to know. I smiled. The scholarship fund had been created using recovered executive bonuses seized during the investigations. Money that once rewarded greed. Now educated families who could never have afforded university. Consequences. They always found their destination. Spring arrived 4 months later. The Empire Consortium released its annual report. For the first time in decades, the opening page did not feature photographs of executives. Instead, it showed factory workers, laboratory researchers, truck drivers, customer support representatives, the people who had carried the company through its darkest season. At the bottom of the page appeared a single sentence. Organizations endure when responsibility is shared. No signature, no executive quote, just the principle itself, exactly as it should be. That afternoon, Theodore Ashcroft invited me to the original headquarters. The old building had long since become a company museum. We walked slowly through its halls. Photographs from 70 years of history lined the walls. Founders, apprentices, expansion projects, failures, recoveries. Near the exit stood an empty display case. Theodore stopped beside it. What belongs here? I looked at the plaque beneath the glass. Reserved for the greatest strategic contribution in company history. I shook my head. Nothing. He raised an eyebrow. Nothing. If people begin worshiping individuals again, we'll repeat everything we just survived. He studied me for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. I chose correctly. No. I looked around the museum. The company finally did. He laughed softly. I suppose that's the better answer. Months passed. Life became wonderfully ordinary. Meetings focused on products instead of politics. Audits became routine instead of frightening. Employees challenged executives without fear of retaliation. Young managers disagreed openly during strategy sessions. No one was punished for asking difficult questions. That was the strongest sign that the culture had changed. Not loyalty, honesty. One evening, as the office emptied, Lena found me standing by the window overlooking the city. What are you thinking about? The day they exiled me. She looked surprised. Do you wish it had never happened? I thought about the question, the humiliation, the accusations, the silence, the long walk out of the executive tower, Daniel lowering his head, Richard's smug smile, Eleanor's certainty. Then I remembered everything that followed. The reforms, the truth, the people who no longer feared their leaders. I answered quietly, no. She frowned. Why? Because if they hadn't believed they'd won, they never would have revealed who they really were. The evening sun reflected across the glass skyline. Somewhere below, thousands of employees left work, carrying nothing more dramatic than groceries, backpacks, and plans for dinner. That simple normalcy had once seemed impossible. Now it was protected, not by secrets, not by one strategist, but by a culture where no one stood above accountability. I picked up the old black notebook from my desk. The first page still read, "The company must survive even if its leaders do not." I closed it gently. Its work was finished. So was mine. I turned off the office lights, locked the door behind me, and walked into the evening without looking back.